Survivors remember final moments of this world-changing tragedy on Inside 9/11 Zero Hour, or on our animal network, Nat Geo Wild. A charged-up Chihuahua bullies the block on Dog Whisperer. Never forget, Inside 9/11 Zero Hour starts now on the National Geographic Channel.
Nearly 10 years after the deadliest terrorist attacks in American history, on May 1st, 2011, U.S. Special Forces finally locate and kill the man responsible, Osama bin Laden.
Today, at my direction, the United States launched a targeted operation against that compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. A small team of Americans carried out the operation with extraordinary courage and capability.
For years, bin Laden warned us that a holy war was coming.
We do not.
As the North Carolina agent stays on the phone with Betty Ong, she is simultaneously receiving updates from the Texas Operations Center.
Okay, we're contacting a flight crew now. We're also contacting ATC.
Okay. It seems like the passengers in this coach might not be aware of what's going on right now.
These two passengers were from first class.
Okay, hold on. Hey, Betty, do you know any information as far as the gentlemen that are in the cockpit with the pilots? Were they from first class? They were sitting in 2A and B.
Schools are open in New York City.
When you live in New York, people say, oh, how crowded this place is. I ask myself, what crowd? There's no crowd here. This is life. This is life in the big city. You don't think about it. I mean, it's like breathing.
Regular start of a day, there were a lot of trading firms, Wall Street type of trading firms that got there earlier.
We have casual dress, and that day I was dressed in a suit.
We're under contract to a firm, a career transition firm. It was the second day, a 2-day class. I had told the class Monday, I said to them,
Portland, Maine. The ticket agent who checked in Mohammed Atta and Abdulaziz Al-Amari has just learned about Flight 11 from a colleague.
She said, geez, did you hear what happened in New York? I said, no. She says, a plane hit the World Trade Center. She said, yeah, it was an LA flight. And I just froze. I said, Boston, LA, yeah. I said, oh my God. I says, I put 2 guys on that plane. I was feeling horrible. Here I am thinking that these guys were terrorists and now they're dead. I was feeling awful.
New York.
There has been massive loss of life in New York City this morning. This makes the World Trade Center bombing of about 9 years ago look like a relatively minor incident.
The Twin Towers are in flames. Phone lines are jammed as people inside the towers and out try to reach loved ones, perhaps for the last time.
Melody, it's Nydia. I saw it. I saw it. The explosion. I just need to know that you're okay, sweetheart.
Maureen, wake up right now. Turn on the news. Turn on the news right now.
I'm so worried about you. Where are you? I hope you're okay. I hope you're on your way over here.
I'm in the World Trade Center. The building was hit by something. I don't know if I'm going to get out, but I love you very much.
Communication is difficult for firefighters as well.
Is anybody over in Tower 1 hear me? Hey, Joe, I need some companies over here in Tower 2. I need some company. All right, Tommy, when you take people down to the lobby, try to get an EMS crew back. It's harder when you try to get down to the lobby to mail post. There's some people up support it. Send all this way.
9:32 a.m. Cleveland's Air Traffic Control Center overhears an unusual transmission from United Airlines Flight 93.
Please sit down. Keep remaining sitting. We have a ball aboard. So it's Call calling Cleveland Center, you're unreadable. Say again slowly.
It is hijacker pilot Ziad Jarrah at the controls of United Flight 93. He's flying over eastern Ohio when he begins to turn the aircraft around and head toward Washington, D.C. Jarrah's target, according to statements made later by al-Qaeda leaders, is the U.S. Capitol building. His 3 lieutenants are armed with knives. They have stabbed at least one person. In first class, passenger Tom Burnett checks for a pulse on the stabbing victim. The man is dead. The muscle hijackers then order Burnett, a 38-year-old medical supplies executive, to the back of the plane, along with the other passengers. She tells him about the World Trade Center attacks.
He wanted to know who was involved, how many airplanes, which airline, what did they want.
The news spreads among the passengers. Salesman Jeremy Glick phones his wife Liz. They will stay connected for the next 26 minutes.
He asked me if this was true. I hesitate for a minute, and then I tell him, yeah, it's true. There are crashing planes there. He asked me if I think the guy who claims he has a bomb really has a bomb, and I said I don't think it is a bomb. I think he's bluffing you.
9:34 a.m. 5 miles west of the Pentagon, American Airlines Flight 77 begins rapidly descending from an altitude of 2,200 feet. Hijacker pilot Hani Hanjour aims the plane's nose at the Pentagon and punches the throttles to maximum power. American 77 plunges toward its target at 530 miles an hour.
I remember hearing the sound of an airplane engine, that whistling sound when they're descending, that.
Firefighter Alan Wallace is fixing his truck along the Pentagon's west perimeter outside the heliport fire station. He and a colleague look up in time to see the plane hurtling toward them.
Skipper and I had enough time for me to yell, "Let's go."
9:37 a.m. Flight 77 slams into the Pentagon. This surveillance video, released in May 2006, captures the jet just before the moment of impact.
The structure completely lifts, the walls cave in.
The fireball was approximately 50 feet in the air, and this was right behind us.
When I opened my eyes, it was like somebody was standing there with a flamethrower.
American 77 slices through the Pentagon's outermost E-ring, striking wall after wall of reinforced concrete and steel beams. The fuselage disintegrates as it plows through the D and C rings. It reaches 310 feet inside the building. Fireballs ricochet along the corridors. People scramble for a way out through the flames.
There was a window to the right of me, and I tried to hit it with my hand to see if I could break it, but it was at tempered glass. I remember I left a blood print of my hand on the window.
In the C-ring, Lieutenant Colonel Ted Anderson, a veteran of Desert Storm, leads a group of 50 people to the emergency exits.
Security guys came running down the hallway and said, "There are shooters in the parking lot." And I just refused to believe that we were under small arms attack from the mall. So I kicked open one of the security doors myself and screamed for everybody to move my way.
Sergeant First Class Chris Brayman, an Army Ranger, evacuates from an undamaged section of the Pentagon. Brayman sees black smoke rising over the building. He sprints to the crash site.
It had every bit of the sounds of combat, the smells, the screams, and the horrors. As I looked up, I just said, "Dear Lord, give us the strength for what I'm about to do."
Sergeant Brayman runs towards the inferno. So does Lieutenant Colonel Anderson. The breach in the Pentagon is 2 stories tall and 75 feet wide. Together, Anderson and Brayman climb through a broken first-floor window near the explosion. They begin pulling out survivors.
As we were going through the smoky hallways, there was a bright light that ran in front of us.
That's when Sergeant Brayman yelled for me, "Sir, help me."
It was a human being. He tripped and fell forward, and we jumped on top of him.
The entire front portion of his body had literally been burned completely off of him. There was no color in his eyes. And I thought, my God, he doesn't have any eyes.
50 feet from the point of impact, Army accountant Sheila Moody is trapped inside her office. She's surrounded by flames.
The smoke and the fumes started taking my breath away, and a voice in my head just said to clap your hands. So I started clapping my hands together as loud and as hard as I could.
Moody feels herself losing consciousness. Sergeant Chris Brayman slips through a gap in the wall.
And I just yelled, "Is anybody there? Is anybody there?" And that's when I noticed a woman on the ground.
I could see just through the smoke for a split second, and I reached over.
All I remember is he was reaching through the clouds and grabbing her.
Brayman carries Sheila Moody out of the building and delivers her to medics. Over eastern Ohio, hijacker pilot Ziad Jarrah is in the cockpit of United Flight 93. His target is the U.S. Capitol building. 9:39 a.m. Cleveland Center records another communication from the hijacked plane.
Hi, here's the captain. I would like to remain seated. We have one aboard and we are going to back to the airport and we have our demand to please remain quiet. Okay, it's United 93 calling. United 93, understand, have a bomb on board, go ahead.
There is no response. Now, America's last line of defense becomes the passengers themselves. Tom Burnett and Jeremy Glick are among those who will lead the charge.
He told me he was putting a plan together to take back the airplane.
He had told me, all right, the guy with the bomb looks kind of small. He's no match for me. I can take him.
45 a.m.
The scene that is eerily reminiscent of what we saw at the World Trade Center. Thick black smoke now emanating from the Pentagon.
Eight minutes after the attack on the Pentagon, the White House orders a full evacuation. Presidential speechwriter David Frum hurries out of the executive office building.
The guards restrain us and say, "Don't run." Then a second or two later, they change their minds and they say, "Run!"
From a bunker underneath the East Wing, Vice President Dick Cheney has phoned President Bush in Sarasota, Florida. He urges him not to return to Washington. The plan is for the president to stay in the air until it's safe to return to the White House. At the FAA's command center in Herndon, Virginia, officials instruct all aircraft flying over the United States to land. It's an unprecedented step. Aboard United Flight 93 over eastern Ohio, passenger Tom Burnett places a third call to his wife, Dina.
He was so matter-of-fact, and he kept saying, don't worry, we're going to do something. I knew that they were going into the cockpit. There was no question.
31-year-old Jeremy Glick tells his wife, Liz, that he's preparing to take action.
So he was going to take a vote just with 3 other guys. There were 3 other guys on the plane that were as big as him, going to do something about it.
Jeremy then tells his wife to give his love to their newborn baby, Emmy.
Jeremy said, if I don't make it out of here, you've got to promise me that Emmy will know how much I love her and how much I love you. I'm thinking, you know, you're my high school sweetheart. We're madly in love. This is not the way my life is going to turn out to be.
9:49 a.m. FAA officials in Virginia contact their Washington headquarters about sending fighter jets to find and intercept United 93. The unspoken question is, will the Air Force have to shoot down the hijacked plane?
Do we want to think about scrambling aircraft? Oh, God, I don't know. That's a decision somebody's going to have to make probably in the next 10 minutes. You know, everybody just left the room.
While indecision paralyzes officials on the ground, the passengers on United Flight 93 are gearing up for a revolt. They'll have to lead a charge, single file up one narrow aisle, and overcome 3 hijackers with knives before reaching the cockpit.
I asked him what else I could do. He said, pray, Dina, just pray.
9:50 a.m. In Lower Manhattan, several thousand firefighters, police officers, and paramedics are at the World Trade Center. People are pouring out of the buildings and into the streets. About 14,000 people have evacuated from the Twin Towers, but about 2,000 are trapped above the impact zones. FBI agent Wesley Wong is stationed at the North Tower command post with police and fire chiefs. He calls FBI headquarters in D.C. and receives some disturbing news.
They said that there were more planes unaccounted for. I relayed that to all the commanders in there, and we were fully expecting to take more hits.
What they don't realize is the threat developing 1,000 feet above them. When the hijacked airliners rammed into the North and South Towers, the explosions blew fireproofing off the building's columns and trusses. Searing flames, fed by thousands of gallons of jet fuel, have begun to soften the exposed steel. Temperatures reach 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit inside the impact zones. Both towers are only minutes away from collapse.
I can tell you from someone who was there in the command center, there was no talk of those buildings collapsing.
This footage shows firefighters, burdened by their heavy clothing and equipment, heading into the Trade Center. They join hundreds of others already climbing upstairs toward the impact floors of both towers. The average firefighter, at this rate, most firefighters face a 3 to 4 hour hike before reaching the impact floors in either building. Battalion Chief Richard Picciotto is heading up to the 35th floor of the North Tower. He's aware that this is the biggest rescue operation in the history of the FDNY.
I knew firemen were going to be injured and killed that day. Just the nature of the job we had in front of us.
In the South Tower, Battalion Chief Oreo Palmer, a marathon runner, has taken an elevator to the 41st floor, then raced up the stairwell to the 78th floor. He's joined by Fire Marshal Ronald Buca, another avid runner who's climbed all the way from the ground floor. Palmer and Buca are the first to reach an impact zone in either tower. 9:52 a.m. Palmer surveys the damage on the 78th floor. He radios the men of Ladder Company 15 who are on their way up.
Battalion 7, Ladder 415. We got tanks, isolated pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down with 2 lines. Radio that. 78th floor, numerous 1045 code 1s.
1045 code 1s means dead bodies.
Chief, what stair you in? South stairway, Adam. South tower. 478. 10-4, we got numerous civilians. We gotta get 2 engines up here. All right, 10-4, we're on our way.
(9:55 a.m.) The outer columns and trusses from the 77th floor up to the 85th floor of the South Tower are ready to give way. While firemen from Ladder Company 15 are climbing up to the impact zone, another member of their company is descending from the 41st floor by elevator. It's the only elevator working in the tower. Fire commanders on the ground are waiting to use this elevator to send more men up. But the car suddenly shuts down, trapping the firefighter inside.
Go ahead, 15 roof. Stuck in the elevator shaft. You're going to have to get a different elevator. We're chopping through the wall to get out.
At the impact zone, up on the 78th floor, Chief Oreo Palmer and Fire Marshal Ronald Bucca stay to fight the blaze among the dead and the dying. Palmer again tries to reach members of Ladder Company 15.
Battalion 7, Ladder 15.
It is the last time anyone hears from either Chief Palmer or Fire Marshal Bucca. Inside 9/11 on the National Geographic Channel. 9:53 a.m. Inside the coach cabin of United Flight 93, passenger Jeremy Glick and 3 others have taken a vote. They've decided to rush the cockpit and try to take back the plane. The revolt will be joined by a number of passengers, including Tom Burnett, Todd Beamer, and Mark Bingham. The plane is now within 200 miles of pilot Ziad Jarrah's target, the U.S. Capitol building. Tom Burnett calls home a 4th and last time.
He told me that they were waiting until they were over a rural area to take back the airplane. I felt that he just wanted me to be there for him.
Jeremy Glick reassures his wife Liz one more time before he sets the phone down.
He said, all right, I'm gonna do it. He said, stay on the line. I'll be right back. I gave the phone to my dad. I went into the bathroom and started throwing up.
The men decide it's time.
I told him that I loved him. And he came to the phone and said, don't worry, we're going to do something.
Recordings not yet released capture screams, loud thumps, and shattering glass and plates. The sounds of a sustained passenger assault. Burnett, Glick, and others fight to break into the cockpit. Hijacker pilot Ziad Jarrah rolls the plane sharply to the left and right. Then he pitches the nose up and down to throw the men off balance.
My dad said that he heard 2 series of screams, almost like it sounded like a roller coaster.
9:58 a.m. Todd Beamer puts down his airphone and says to nearby passengers, "Are you ready? Okay, let's roll." He joins the assault in progress. After several moments, Jarrah stabilizes the airplane. He exclaims, "Is that it? Should we finish it off?" A fellow hijacker replies, "No, not yet. When they all come, we finish it off." The revolt only intensifies. One passenger yells, "In the cockpit. If we don't, we'll die." Finally, a hijacker shouts, "Allahu Akbar," Arabic, for God is great. United 93 plunges toward the Earth at 580 miles an hour. It crashes into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Then I remember at some point going into the kitchen maybe to get a drink, and my dad walking the other way, and he just stopped and hugged me and he started crying. And I remember looking at him and saying, "Wait, you think he's dead?"
9:58 a.m.
Clearly, we're in the middle of the worst ever act of terrorism, and it may not be over.
TV reporter Mike Sheehan and cameraman Dave Corporon are standing on Church Street about 100 yards due east of the Twin Towers.
We decided the best thing for us now is we got to get inside.
We
figured we might be able to get into one of the towers. Not to go up, but to maybe get in the lobby.
The men are about to enter the South Tower when a Port Authority officer refuses them entry and pushes them back up the street.
I love you too. I love you. I love you.
4 blocks south of the Trade Center, Stanley Pramath and Brian Clark, 2 men who narrowly escaped from the South Tower, look back in awe at the burning skyscrapers.
I'm holding on to the fence of the Trinity Church, and I'm telling Brian, this building is going down. And I don't have a clue why I'm telling Brian this. And he stopped me.
So that's just drapery and carpets and furniture burning, and I didn't finish the sentence when way up high, you could see the glass starting to burst out into space, and boom, 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 boom.
9:59 a.m. The outer columns of the South Tower finally give way.
People around me is sort of in my peripheral vision taking off. Everybody just taking off.
I see our other cameraman, Jack. He says, "Look out behind you, look out behind you." And I turn and I swing to my left, and the debris field was roaring up Broadway.
I run just trying to get indoors someplace, and there's nowhere to get indoors.
I'm not going to see my wife. I'm not going to see my 4-month-old daughter again. I'm going to suffocate right here in the middle of Broadway.
Amid the chaos, Usman Farman, a credit analyst and Muslim, is racing up West Street.
I'm running, and I completely, like misstepped, like pothole, or, maybe just fell over myself. I'm lying on my back, and this guy comes up to me. He had a yarmulke and, curly sideburns and a full beard. He was probably the last person I would have ever thought to kind of, pick me up and be like, let's go. He says, "Hey, brother, take my hand, let's get out of here."
The 2 men, one Muslim, one Jew, both New Yorkers, take off running together. They lose each other in the crowd. On the 35th floor of the still-standing North Tower, Fire Chief Richard Picciotto freezes in his tracks with 24 other firefighters.
I'm just looking up, expecting that the ceiling is just going to explode in a second. And then the noise and the shaking goes right through us. Just goes right through us. You could hear it above us, and then it goes right through. You could hear it like on top of us, and then hear it below us. And then from this tremendous noise, the shaking, silence.
Louis Leshy, who escaped from the 86th floor of the North Tower, is lying on the floor of the shopping mall that runs below the World Trade Center. He's covered in dust and debris.
I called out. It was pitch black. And I remember saying to myself, I'm not going to die in this place. I made up my mind then I wouldn't.
2 blocks east of the Trade Center, the smothering blanket of ash gradually settles.
Fulton and Broadway.
The whole city became very soft. And what you could hear is your voice.
Little particles are falling, like it's still snowing. Like if you survived a nuclear winter, this would have looked like.
Inside the North Tower, Richard Picciotto and his men huddle near the elevators on the 35th floor. Then, over the FDNY radio,
we heard the tower's down. Tower's down. What tower? I knew what happened. I just didn't want to believe it. So, you know, you talk about a sickening feeling in the gut of your stomach. You know, the first thing I knew was, you know, how many people do I know who just died?
Picciotto realizes that the North Tower is also bound to collapse.
You know, in the back of my mind, there's this ticking going on. This ticking is that bomb that's going to go off any second. So I got to get these people out quick.
Shanksville, Pennsylvania, 10:10 a.m. Firefighters arrive at the crash site of United Airlines Flight 93. They find no survivors. Air traffic controllers in Cleveland lost the plane on radar and still don't realize that it crashed. Cleveland contacts the Northeast Air Defense Sector, known as NEADS. NEADS cannot locate the aircraft either, so they call the Washington Air Traffic Control Center.
United 9-3, have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land? Because we had confirmation.
He did not land.
Oh, he's down?
Dina Burnett learns about her husband's fate on television.
I just remember almost falling. The strength of my body just fading away completely. I'd never felt such sorrow for any reason.
New York, 10:10 a.m.
I am at the intersection of Broadway and Chambers Street, where it looks as if police are trying to virtually evacuate the whole lower Manhattan area.
In the North Tower of the World Trade Center, Fire Chief Richard Picciotto is descending from the 35th floor. He knows he's running out of time. He shouts evacuation orders across the FDNY radio and races to all 3 stairwells with a bullhorn to get people out.
I'm abandoning the people that are trapped above. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever made. I like to tell myself that most of the people that were trapped above the point of impact were really probably dead by this point. Maybe not by fire, but by the smoke inhalation, because they were stuck there for an hour and a half or so. And, you know, we had to get the rescuers out. I had to get the firemen, the emergency people out.
On the 64th floor, Port Authority engineer Pasquale Buzzelli and his 15 colleagues are waiting inside their office for rescuers to arrive. They're located in the northwest corner of the building with no view of the South Tower, so they don't know it collapsed. An hour before, Buzzelli and his co-workers had called building security. They had been told to stay put. Buzzelli then phoned his wife Louise at their New Jersey home to tell her that he was okay.
And I said, well, why aren't you leaving? Why are you still there? And he said, don't worry, the police or firemen or whoever are gonna be on the way up. When I saw the first building come down, I thought, oh my God, his building is just like that one.
Buzzelli and his colleagues dial building security again. Now they are told to get out. They begin the long trek down from the 64th floor.
And I know he was still in there. Is it going to be a matter of time before it's his building that's coming down?
Arlington, Virginia, 10:10 a.m. At the Pentagon, Sergeant Chris Brayman and Lieutenant Colonel Ted Anderson try running back inside the impact zone to rescue more workers, but are stopped by firemen.
It was very confrontational. There were people thinking, let's bum rush the firemen and just try and get in on our own.
Just as we were being restrained to going back in, there was the building collapsed.
33 minutes after the attack, a giant slice of the Pentagon's west perimeter caves in from top to bottom.
There's no doubt in my mind we would all be dead had it not been for the firemen.
New York, 10:21 a.m. "22 minutes after the collapse of the World Trade Center's South Tower, Louis Leshy climbs out from the underground mall and into daylight.
And I called my wife and I told her I was fine. And I said, this is funny, I'm going to walk uptown, I'll do some window shopping. I had no concept. People said that I was going on a rush, a high.
Inside the North Tower, Fire Chief Picciotto does a quick sweep of each floor as he heads down stairwell B.
I was trying to be the last person down. I was trying to, keep everyone moving and keep everyone pushed down.
Chief Picciotto finishes his sweep of the 7th floor. He's trailing just behind a pack of more than 50 firefighters and civilians. 1,070 feet above them, the inner core of the building buckles.
All of a sudden, about the 6th floor, that noise started again. That noise, that loud noise, that shaking.
10:28 a.m. The North Tower begins to fall.
Is that the second building of the World Trade Center going?
Yes, that is the second. That is the second tower. That is the second tower.
I'm watching my husband die right in front of me, and I can't do anything about it.
New York City's Twin Towers lie in ruins. Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda have carried out the most devastating act of terrorism in history. Three hours later, rescuers are searching for survivors in a mountain of twisted steel and rubble. On top of that mountain, a man regains consciousness. It is Port Authority engineer Pasquale Buzzelli.
The first thought in my mind when I opened up my eyes was that I'm dead. And just as I was thinking that, I coughed and I felt pain in my leg. And, I said to myself, I'm alive.
Buzzelli was in the stairwell at the 22nd floor when the tower fell. He rode down the rest of the way as the tower collapsed around him. He is perched on a slab 4 stories in the air. His worst injury, a broken leg. The only way down is a 15-foot drop onto a pile of sharp metal.
I'd call out for help or call out for people that were with me, you know, to see if I just heard nothing. And then finally I heard someone calling out for Richie. And I yelled out, help, help, you know, I'm up here.
Buzzelli gets the attention of a group of firefighters. The Richie they are looking for is Fire Chief Richard Picciotto. About 50 feet away, Picciotto is buried with 13 other survivors inside what's left of the tower's core stairwell. From the 6th floor down, this lone section of stairs withstood the collapse. As the dust clears, Picciotto and the other survivors see a sliver of light above them. They claw their way toward the light and out from the rubble. The battalion chief surveys the fiery wasteland around him.
I'm out, but all I see is devastation. I'm thinking this is a nuclear shock wave that I don't know if it took half of New York City or half of New York State.
The World Trade Center is no more. What was there this morning when we woke up is now gone.
After the collapse of the Twin Towers, firefighters and police converge at Ground Zero to dig by hand for survivors. There's little they can do. The Twin Towers are now an impenetrable pile of steel and concrete. Hospitals stand by with their triage units, anticipating a flood of injured from Ground Zero.
Slowly, it became clear that there would be no living coming out.
8:30 p.m. President Bush addresses a stunned nation from the Oval Office. He announces an aggressive new policy toward terrorism.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Terrorism is no longer going to be thought of as a crime. It's going to be thought of as an act of war.
The first target, Afghanistan, where the radical Islamic Taliban government is harboring Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda.
We needed to be at war, aggressively, effectively at war. We need to be at war against the people who were our real threats and who demonstrated their willingness to kill Americans.
Across the U.S., civilian aircraft are grounded. In the skies, an eerie silence, pierced only by the occasional roar of Air Force fighter jets. At CIA headquarters, counterterrorism officials have scanned the passenger lists of the 4 hijacked flights. They recognize the names of 2 Al-Qaeda operatives.
We really, I think in a pretty short order, got a pretty good picture of who was involved.
I don't think anyone who had worked on this problem expected any less than what happened on 9/11. If it surprised the policymakers, then shame on them.
Midnight at Ground Zero. The search and rescue effort unfolds within the smoking hills of rubble. Hundreds of shoes litter the site, yet not a single corpse lies in view.
Each collapse was highly centralized and localized. If you were within the zone, these concentrated zones, basically the footprint of the buildings themselves, you were going to die.
At the center of all this activity, the jagged remnants of the Twin Towers reach toward the sky. The city faces a daunting recovery and cleanup effort in the months ahead.
We took a big punch and we got knocked on our ass, and people wanted to show the world that we could, you know, dust ourselves off and get back up.
September 12th, the sun rises over Lower Manhattan. The fires beneath Ground Zero are still burning. FBI agent Wesley Wong returns to the site and finds volunteers from the night before still digging for survivors. As he approaches the pile, he recognizes a chorus of chirping sounds. They're the signals given off by the electronic locators worn by firemen.
What you heard that morning was hundreds of these locators chirping.
Photos and flyers of the missing wallpaper the city, especially in Lower Manhattan.
If anyone has any idea if they've seen him or knows where he is, to call us. He's got two little babies. Two little babies.
You still see the faces. You know, the people put up faces of their loved ones, pictures. The park where the kids were playing was now littered with photographs of loved ones. And you looked at those each and every day, and you try to imagine that this was once a living, breathing human being.
2,750 people will be confirmed dead at the World Trade Center, including 157 who were aboard the two planes that hit the towers. At the Pentagon, the death toll is 189, including the 64 passengers and crew from Flight 77. And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, there are 44 dead. The total death toll from 9/11, 2,983. In the weeks following that September day, Americans begin to find their footing in a new world known as post-9/11. Commercial air travel, grounded for 4 days, resumes nationwide. And the New York Stock Exchange reopens after a 6-day shutdown, the longest since the Great Depression. 2 weeks after the attacks, former members of the highly classified military intelligence team, Able Danger, reportedly come to a startling realization. They claim to have connected Mohammed Atta and other 9/11 hijackers to a terror cell as early as 2000. Military lawyers, they say, did not allow them to pass this information to the FBI. To date, Department of Defense officials say they have been unable to verify these claims. In October, President Bush signs the Patriot Act into law, giving the federal government new powers to combat terrorism. That same month, American military forces invade bin Laden's sanctuary, Afghanistan. It is the epic battle that Osama bin Laden had hoped for. But bin Laden vastly underestimates the American military. Kabul falls on November 13, 2001. Yet bin Laden manages to slip across the border into Pakistan.
He's hiding someplace in Pakistan, probably on the border, and he's being hosted by Afghan and Pakistani tribals who live in that ungoverned area. He's welcomed there because he's a hero to them now. He defies the world in the name of Islam. He's bigger than life because he's eluded us. And he has money.
In the months following 9/11, while bin Laden evades capture, authorities arrest hundreds of suspected al-Qaeda operatives. September 11, 2002. On the one-year anniversary of 9/11, Pakistani authorities arrest Ramzi bin al-Shibh after a gunfight in Karachi. He is the Hamburg cell member who couldn't get a U.S. visa and became bin Laden's go-between with the hijackers. 6 months later, CIA and Pakistani agents capture Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the engineer of the 9/11 plot. They roust him from his sleep in a villa near Islamabad and transfer him to a U.S. military base in Afghanistan. There, he provides details of the 9/11 plot and admits that he was the mastermind. Years later, In March 2007, at a hearing at Guantanamo Bay, he claims responsibility for more than 30 other terrorist plots, including plans to hit towers in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Chicago, and to assassinate the late Pope John Paul II and former President Jimmy Carter. Mohammed also claims responsibility for the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center and the failed attempt by shoe bomber Richard Reed to blow up an airliner in December 2001. March 2003. President Bush leads the U.S. into a war that he defines as the next step in the new post-9/11 foreign policy. U.S. forces invade Iraq and topple the regime of Saddam Hussein, a dictator who was left in power at the end of the First Gulf War.
After 9/11,
July 2004, the National Commission on the Terrorist Attacks upon the United States issues its final report.
This was a failure of policy, management, capability, and above all, a failure of imagination.
The report makes no mention of the military intelligence program Able Danger. October 29, 2004, just 4 days before the U.S. presidential election, bin Laden releases a videotaped statement.
We had to destroy the towers in America, so they taste what we tasted, and they stopped killing our women and children.
This is Osama bin Laden legacy. The man who dared to actually to say to American, you interfering in our business, we will interfere in your business. You are killing our people, I am killing your people.
In many ways, Osama bin Laden has achieved what he originally set out to as a young mujahideen.
Even if bin Laden is killed or captured, there is sufficient momentum for the jihad campaign against the West to continue, because he has galvanized a movement that will certainly outlast him.
I heard it repeatedly after the '93 World Trade Center bombing by saying they didn't kill enough people. It wasn't said by militants, it was said by FBI agents. They didn't say it because they wanted more blood, but they understood that it would take more blood in order to get the government to react. And now I'm hearing other FBI and other officials say to me, Steve, we're going to need another 9/11.
I don't think the American people have a good idea of what a long and bloody road this is going to be.
Since 9/11, that long and bloody road has become bloodier still. October 12, 2002. A series of bombs hit a nightclub district in Bali, Indonesia. The blast killed nearly 200 people, most of them tourists. March 11, 2004. Explosives hidden inside backpacks blow apart 4 commuter trains in Madrid during the morning rush hour. The attack kills 191 people. July 7, 2005. Bombs tear through 3 underground trains and a double-decker bus in downtown London. At least 55 people are killed. July 23, 2005. In the popular resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, car bombs killed at least 88 people. The war on terrorism proceeds, both on the battlefield and in the courtroom. May 4, 2006. Zacarias Moussaoui, the self-proclaimed 20th hijacker arrested just before 9/11, is the only person in the U.S. charged in relation to the attacks. He is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. June 8, 2006. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the terrorist bin Laden called the Prince of Al-Qaeda in Iraq is confirmed dead, killed when Air Force F-16s bomb a safe house north of Baghdad. 3 weeks later, Al-Qaeda releases an audio tape in which bin Laden calls Zarqawi a brave knight. He adds, "We will continue, God willing, fighting you and your allies until you go back defeated." July 3, 2006, the public learns that the CIA has disbanded the unit formed to catch bin Laden. Sources point out that since 9/11, Al-Qaeda has become more splintered, less in the control of one man. 5 years later, on May 1, 2011, U.S. Special Forces act on intelligence built on a tip from a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay and pounce on this compound in a quiet town just 72 miles north of Pakistan's capital, Islamabad. Their target, the most wanted man in the world. Around 1 a.m. Pakistani time, a team led by Navy SEALs swoop in and breach the compound's high barbed wire-laden walls. They're prepared to capture bin Laden alive, but they know the possibility is remote. The two sides exchange heavy gunfire for 40 minutes. When the dust settles, 54-year-old Osama bin Laden is dead. The Special Forces spirit bin Laden's body back to Afghanistan via helicopter for DNA confirmation, unwilling to leave anything to chance. At nearly midnight Eastern Standard Time on May 1st, President Obama addresses the nation and the world from the East Room of the White House.
The cause of securing our country is not complete, but tonight we are once again reminded that America can do whatever we set our mind to. That is the story of our history. Whether it's the pursuit of prosperity for our people, or the struggle for equality for all our citizens, our commitment to stand up for our values abroad, and our sacrifices to make the world a safer place.
Did you know the world's first pizzeria opened in Naples, Italy in 1830? The first pizzas